What does the New York Giants brass need to do to show ownership that the franchise is heading in the right direction under their watch? I'm going to give you my blueprint coming up next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all my written work. And as always, welcome on in to my Blue Crew community members, my everydayers, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today's show, I always welcome questions from my listeners here on the Locked On Giants podcast and also my readers over on New York Giants on SI. And a question that I get asked a lot is, what did the Giants need to do in order to show progress? Is it a number of wins? What is it that they need to do? They being, of course, the leadership of Brian Daboll, Schoen, and the players underneath them. What do they need to do in order for Schoen and Daboll to continue in their respective roles? What do they need to show ownership? Well, we're going to talk about that. I have some things that I wrote down. Basically, I had 5 main areas. Some of them are kind of related to winning, obviously, which is the biggest thing of all. But I'm going to break it down for you on today's show and maybe, hopefully answer that question because, I gave a lot of thought to that over the weekend. I'm like, okay, what could they possibly need to show besides wins that will show that the organization is headed in the right direction? So that's today's show. Now, look, when we think of the New York Giants and the number of wins, I don't believe there is necessarily a set number of wins. So it's not like they've got to win, 10 games or 11 games. I think we could all probably agree that at this point in the Giants rebuild, if you will, this is not a Super Bowl team. All right. This is not a team that is probably going to challenge for a Super Bowl. So that said, what can they do? What baby steps can they take in order to show that the franchise is headed in the right direction? All right. Step number 1, at least in my opinion, the Giants need to post a better than 500 record in the division, the NFC East. All right. Now, the last time the New York Giants had a better than 500 record in the division, they went 4-2 in 2020. Didn't make the playoffs that year. Now, even the year that they made the playoffs under Schoen and Daboll, which was 2022, the first year of that regime, the Giants went 1-4 in the division. And if I remember correctly, they sweated it out towards until the very end of the season or near the end of the season. I think they had clinched it in, I want to say week 17, excuse me, because the following week, was week 18. It was against the Eagles and they sat all their starters. So, the first step, I think, to having postseason success and also showing that you're on the, that you're improving, you got to win in the division. All right. So again, in 2022, the Giants went 1-4 against NFC East opponents. 2023, they went 3-3. Last year, 0-6. They went backwards. That's got to change. All right. You've got to be able to win your division games because if you want a chance at the postseason, you've got to start by winning your division games. You don't want to have to rely on others because, look, if you can win the division, that is the surest path to the postseason. If you've got to, rely on others to help you get into a wild card spot, that's really not a desirable area. And I think the Giants, if they could pull everything together at the very minimum, they could be a wild card team. I'd like to see them win the division. I don't know that they're there yet, but I think, given that they had another strong draft class, at least on paper, it looks like they might have what they need to eventually get there. So going at least 500, preferably over 500 in the division's got to be step 1, in my opinion, to show ownership that, hey, this franchise is headed in the right direction. Now, step 2, blowout games. Now, this is kind of wild. I went back and I looked up how many games did the Giants lose during the Schoen and Daboll era? 51 games, not counting any postseason. These are regular season games I'm talking about. The Giants have been blown out. And when I say blowout, at least 2 scores qualifies as a blowout. They've been blown out 16 times in 51 games. So that's roughly a 31.3% blowout rate. You are not going to go very far if you are getting blown out of the water before you even have a chance. All right. Now, some of the scores are even deceptive. Right. So you might look at some of the scores that aren't counted in this blowout rate, where the Giants, because the opponent kind of had a comfortable lead and they kind of took the foot off the gas pedal, the Giants were able to score some garbage time points. So the blowout rate is actually maybe a little bit higher if you consider, what actually counted when the game was quote unquote competitive and there was a chance for, the Giants to flip the table. So the bottom line is the Giants, they can't be getting blown out. I mean, if you average this out, and again, I'm just going based on the final score. I haven't taken into consideration, the times when the opponent had such a big lead and the Giants scored garbage time points to make it narrower. The Giants have done it 16 times in the regular season. So divide that over the course of 3 seasons. That comes to just over 5 games per year that the Giants are getting their doors blown off. Winning teams just don't have that happen. I'm not saying that a blowout, can't happen once in a while. It happens to the best of teams. But when you're doing it over 5 times a season, you're not going to go very far. And if you're getting blown out, then you've got to ask yourself if you have the right personnel, if you have the right coaching, the right processes in place to be competitive. And clearly, I think the Giants have the right coaching in place, but something was astray, whether it was the personnel, whether it was the way they were deployed, whatever the case may be. The bottom line is the Giants were getting blown out a little too often, I think, for their own good and for ownership's tastes. And John Mara himself said it. He said that he was tired of seeing, teams go up and down the field against the Giants. And it's happened way too many times. So that's something that definitely needs to change going forward. All right. I mean, look, the Giants, based on the regular season games, they've been shut out once. Okay. But they have also scored 10 or fewer points in 12 games. You can't have that. Just can't have that. You've got to, find a way to score. And we're going to talk a little bit more about scoring coming up a little bit later. But anyway, blowouts is point number 2. They've got to reduce the number of blowouts that they're facing. Now, coming up next, we're going to talk about wins, obviously, which are important. And we're going to go into more detail about wins and scoring. That's coming up right after this. Hey, Giant fans, the NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time than now to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. If you've got a read on who's heating up, why not back it up with a same-game parlay? And how about $200 in bonus bets adding to your excitement? That's right, you can earn $200 in bonus bets to use as you see fit if your first $5 bet hits. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. And again, if you win with that first $5 bet, you will get $200 in bonus bets. So go on and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And coming up this week on Locked On Giants, I'm going to have another guest for you, Mark Schofield, who I think a lot of you might remember. Mark Schofield is a quarterback expert, does a lot of work scouting quarterbacks. His takes are always gold. So we're going to have him on the show to talk about Jackson Dart and what Jackson Dart brings to the table, where he needs to work, what he needs to work on, and so on and so forth. We are also going to have, obviously, minicamp coverage. Giants rookie minicamp starts on Friday. So I will have for you a show on Friday when I get back, and we'll probably do a wrap up on Sunday. So the minicamp, I don't anticipate there's going to be a lot of terms of practicing or team drills, but I can at least give you some observations and what I'm hearing from the mini camp. So that's coming up later this week on the Locked On Giants podcast. All right, let's get back to today's topic, and that is, what does success need to look like for the Giants regime in 2025 if they want to keep their jobs? All right. So the first segment, we talked about winning in the division. We talked about avoiding blowout losses. All right, let's talk more about winning now. The Giants, they have not, even when they've won with very few exceptions, their wins haven't really been convincing. And by that, I mean, you sit there and you basically sweat it out. And I think if you really want to show some progress, you've got to be more confident in your winning, if that makes sense. So some numbers for you. The Giants in 51 games, 16 of their wins have been one score or less. All right. So that's roughly 31.3% of their wins have been one score or less. So too many close games. Now, 5 games of the 51 played in which the Giants have won have seen them win by 2 scores or more. So that's roughly 9.8%. So basically, you want to see some of those tight games turn into not blowouts, but you want a nice, comfortable lead. You don't want to have to sit there and say, oh my gosh, is something going to go wrong? It just seems like there's been too many times when the Giants just play it too close to the, to the vest there, and, they end up losing. And wouldn't it be nice if you could just sit back and say, okay, you know what? They should easily score at least 2 more, 2 scores extra against opponent A, B, C, and D. So just make it a little bit more convincing. The tight wins are just so tight that there's really no margin for error. And this is important because in the past, the Giants haven't been good enough to overcome mistakes. So they basically, in these tight games, have had to play mistake-free ball. And as we know, that hasn't been the case. So it would be nice if they could build up a nice little cushion for themselves to where if they do make a mistake somewhere along the line, and a mistake's going to happen because there is no such thing as a perfect game, it's not going to come back to bite them at the end of the day. So that's something that I think, maybe needs to be shown more of starting this year. All right, I mentioned scoring. Now, this is important because other than for the quarterback situation, the Giants' offense, or the projected starting offense, I should say, is basically the same as it was last year. Now, look, if you're Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, you might say to ownership, well, the quarterback play held us back. Okay, you can make that argument. But here's where I would challenge that argument. Did the quarterback play necessarily hold them back in 2022 when they won 9-7-1 and made the playoffs? I don't think it did. I mean, you could make a case, I suppose, that, Saquon Barkley was a big reason why the Giants went 9-7-1. But did Daniel Jones at the time, did he do anything that really, cost them games? I don't think he did. I don't remember him doing so. So what was the difference between 2022 and 2024, besides the fact that they didn't have Saquon? The quarterback play? Where did the quarterback play go wrong? All right. So people were also blaming the offensive line. People were blaming the receivers for the drop passes. But, again, with the exception of the quarterback position, they're running it back with the exact same offense, or the projected starting offense. So that being said, let's take a look here. All right. The Giants, in their losses, 32 losses over the 3 years, have averaged 13.6 points per game. Okay. Now, in their wins that they've had over the last 3 years, they have averaged 24.6 points in those games. All right. That's about 18 wins and 1 tie. So, bottom line, Brian Daboll, if he is going to call the plays again this year, and it's possible that he will. I don't know that he will. I'll have a better idea once I start seeing the practices, who's got the radio and which direction they're going in. But whoever is calling the plays, they got to score more points. Okay. The Giants, they averaged 16.1 points per game last year, which was towards the bottom. The average points scored per game by the top teams in the playoffs, was 25.7. So the Giants, if you want a goal to shoot for, you want to be averaging somewhere around 25 points per game, because that seems to be the magic number, particularly over the last several years. The successful teams that average 25 points per game usually have good records. If you have under that, you're playing with fire. And the further away you are from that, the worse your record is obviously going to be. So whoever is going to call the plays, the plays have to be set up to complement what they've got, obviously. Moreover, the execution needs to be there. All right. Now, I'm not blaming, the Giants' scoring woes in the past solely on the play calling, although there were times that the play calling left something to be desired. But the execution has to be there. You can't have drop passes. You can't have missed blocks. You can't have guys missing holes, as they approach the line of scrimmage. You can't have guys being, ankle tackled. All that stuff. You can't have penalties that send you going in the wrong direction. These are all things that have cost the Giants points and have, caused drives to stall. So all of that's got to get cleaned up. And again, I'm not saying they need to play perfectly every week, because that's not going to happen. But if you can cut down some of those mistakes, because, look, when you make mistake after mistake after mistake and you're not good enough to overcome those mistakes, you're going to lose. So the Giants scoring, obviously, that has to be a big one. If they can get closer to scoring or averaging 25 points per game, I think they're going to be in a lot better shape than, scoring just 16.1 points a game. All right, coming up next, we've got a big one. This is a key thing that needs to happen, in my opinion, for the Giants to show ownership that they are headed in the right direction. What is it? I will tell you right after this. Hey, Giant fans, say goodbye to sticky notes, scribbled plans on the fridge, and overlapping calendar invites. The Skylight calendar is here to bring clarity to the chaos and help families stay organized without the stress. This sleek digital display syncs with your existing calendars, Google, Apple, Outlook, and more, making it so simple to track appointments, practices, dinners, and reminders all in one easy-to-see place. Look, in my line of work, things frequently pop up on my calendar, and quite often things change due to breaking news, changes in practice times, and other factors that are common in my job. So a lot of times my husband's like, okay, what's your schedule like? When are you coming home? What's the plan for dinner? Well, ever since getting my Skylight calendar, which we have in a central location in our home, there are no more questions about what my schedule is like, because I can update it on the fly and have it available so that he knows when I'm coming home and when dinner is and all that other good stuff, and when we can sync up appointments together. So if you're looking to bring some organization to your household's busy schedules, give Skylight a try. Right now, Skylight is offering our listeners $30 off their 15-inch calendars when you go to skylightcal.com/NFL. That's SKYLIGHTCAL.com/NFL to get $30 off your 15-inch calendar. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we're taking a look at What does success need to look like for the Giants' current regime, Brian Daboll, and of course, General Manager Joe Schoen? What do they need to show ownership in order to say, hey, we've got the franchise going in the right direction? So we've talked about most of the stuff is offensive related. I don't want to ignore the defensive side of the ball because the defense, obviously it was a problem last year. And that, of course, kind of leads into this next topic. And that is not wasting talent. Now, what do I mean by that? Quite simply, two things. All right. Number one, stop trying to plug square pegs into round holes. Right. How many times on offense did we see that? We saw it with Joshua Zudu being plugged in at left tackle, despite the fact that he's not a tackle. We kind of saw it with Evan Neal, who hasn't really worked out at right tackle, and who I know I've been screaming for the last couple of years to move him to guard. And that, of course, is now finally going to happen. And those of you who watched yesterday's show with Cy from Our Lads, he talked about why Evan Neal is probably going to be more successful playing inside at guard. All right. Defensively, all right, I felt that was probably the biggest area where the Giants wasted talent. And by that, I mean, Shane Bowen came in, wanted to play his style of defense, but he didn't have the players, the natural fits to do that. So what did he do? He kind of, again, forced square pegs into round holes. We saw, for example, Jason Pinnock, the safety, misused. We saw Bobby Okereke, the inside linebacker, misused. Deonte Banks, the cornerback, he struggled, right? Basically, they were asking these guys to do things that weren't a fit for what they wanted to do. So when you have a situation like that, you either coach these guys up or you say, you know what? I can't quite do A, B, C, and D. So I'm going to need to adapt a little bit to take advantage of what I have. The Giants didn't do a good job of that at all on defense. And not surprisingly, the defense, if you look at, free agency, if you look at the draft, the defense got a lot of love. All right. So you've got to take what you have and get them into positions where they can excel. And if it means adapting your philosophies a little bit, tweaking here and there, you've got to do that. That's why you're getting paid. And I think, over the years, too many coaches just come in and they're like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to run. And, oh, okay, maybe this player doesn't quite fit what I want to do, but we're going to have them do it anyway. A good coach will figure out how to adapt. And the Giants just haven't done that. And I feel like that has resulted in talent being wasted. Now, another area where I feel talent has been wasted is when guys don't develop for whatever the reason. Maybe because they're being moved around too much, or maybe because the coaching staff has a specific fit in mind for them and they don't want to move off of it. And I'm thinking of, for example, Joshua Zudu. When he came in, he was projected to be a guard. But the last couple of years, they had him at tackle, including throwing him at tackle at the start of the 2023 season when he hadn't even practiced it all spring or all summer. Is that the best use of talent? It is not, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, that is a waste of talent. Now, for all we know, had he developed, or had he had opportunities to play left tackle during the spring and the summer prior to that 2023 season, maybe he would have developed, maybe he wouldn't have. But to throw a guy in to the deep end of the pool without preparing him, that's just not the way to go. That's like coaching on the fly. And when you start coaching on the fly like that, chances are the results are not going to be what you want. And, I'll leave you with this last thing because, again, throughout this show, I've been talking heavily about the offense, and with good reason, because the offense has just been, lacking a pulse, especially the last couple of years. Think back to when Brian Daboll was hired by this franchise. One of the big appeals of Brian Daboll was supposedly his creativity as an offensive coordinator, his ability to develop quarterbacks, all right, like what he did with Josh Allen, and just his ability to, to put together a firepower on offense that carried the team despite what was going on the other side of the ball. We haven't seen that. Okay? For whatever the reason, we have not seen that. Now, is it because of the talent? That's part of it. People say, well, he developed Josh Allen to be this great quarterback, but he couldn't do it with Daniel Jones. Well, I don't know that it's fair to compare Josh Allen as a raw prospect with Daniel Jones as a raw prospect. Okay? Just like I don't think it's fair to say, to compare Josh Allen with Jackson Dart. Let Jackson Dart develop. There's going to be things Jackson Dart does well that maybe, you could say Josh Allen doesn't do as well, and then vice versa. But remember, Josh Allen has been in the league now for a number of years. Jackson Dart's just getting started, and he's going to sit and learn for the next year. So he's got to acclimate. Now, so you can make that argument. You could say, well, is it the talent? Maybe. But again, if you have a willing student who is willing to learn, who is willing to work at something, who is willing to be coached up, a lot of times you can overcome some of the, physical deficiencies you might have in your game. And I just don't feel like the Giants have done a good enough job with that during the 3 years that Schoen and Daboll have been in charge of the team. So the bottom line, John Mara, when he spoke to the media at the end of last year, he didn't say it's playoffs or bust. He didn't say we need to win 10 games. He didn't attach any of those conditions. He basically said, I want to feel better about this team this time next year than I do now. These are all baby steps that this team needs to take. The scoring, the personnel fits, the coaching up, winning, dominating in division. These are all baby steps. They are all attainable. But the big question is, do they have the right people in place? You'd like to think that they do. Are they missing in any areas or deficient in any areas? Time will tell. There's always going to be the unexpected monkey wrench that gets thrown into the equation, such as, an injury wave that wipes out an entire position group. But this is where coaching comes in. You can't have, injuries as your excuse. If Dexter Lawrence, God forbid, goes down again, you want to have a guy who can step in and where you don't have a huge drop off. Because if you don't have that, then something's wrong with your roster construction. So those are the steps that I think the Giants need to show this year in order for Schoen and Daboll to continue. I am optimistic based on the draft that they just had. I am optimistic based on the free agency class they brought in. There are still questions to be answered. Again, who's going to call the plays on offense? Is Shane Bowen, does he have what he needs now, or is he going to have to adapt a little bit? And can he adapt? Our special teams, which I didn't even talk about, are they going to be better? So there are plenty of questions still to be answered. And we, of course, here at the Locked On Giants podcast, follow along and we'll bring you progress updates as they come in. All right, Giant fans, that is going to do it for this edition of Locked On Giants. I want to thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And be sure you keep it here all week long. Like I said, rookie minicamp is coming up. It starts on Friday. So I am excited to bring you that coverage here on the Locked On Giants podcast. So until tomorrow, everybody, have a good one. And I'll see you tomorrow.